On today's episode of I Could Talk to You All Day, we are going to be talking about self-advocacy. We firmly believe that we have the right and responsibility to advocate for ourselves as much as we advocate for others, or more. We have this tendency as leaders to eat last. We've been taught to serve others before we serve ourselves. And in many cases, this leads to us not only stagnating, but sometimes even backsliding, or known as self-sufficient, when really we have needs and we need support. I Could Talk to You All Day is a podcast about what it means to be a leader while also being human. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz.
And I'm John Spears, and we coach executives and leaders just like you about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted.
We're so glad you're here.
Let's get the conversation started.
John Edward Spears.
Jingleheimer Schmidt.
No, that's not your middle name. Your middle name is James, right?
Yes. Lauren James. JJS.
Lauren Michelle.
Lauren Michelle. Aw.
Michelle. I know. Almost Victoria, but my mother thankfully decided that Victoria and Lefkowitz was like too many letters. Grateful for that last minute decision. Listen, Lefkowitz has been a hard name.
You have put in the time. You need to ride that baby to the end.
Yeah. I want to get married for all the wrong reasons. I need a husband who will shovel for me, hang stuff up, walk my future dog, give me his easier last name. Like, none of those are the right reasons to get married, which is maybe why I haven't met them.
Maybe, yeah.
Yes.
For those of you listening, we just spent the last hour crying, and so we're coming in real hot today with our conversation. We are like all warmed up. We have like done the pre-work, we've done the warm-up, we've stretched, and we're ready to like hit the ground running.
Absolutely, we are. Yes. And interestingly, our topic today is self-advocacy, which is part of the conversation we were having while we were both crying.
Yeah.
And so
which by the way happens a lot. Anytime Lauren and I get on a phone call, a Zoom, a FaceTime, a text, there are probably like 90% sure tears are going to be a part of the experience.
Somebody's crying.
So someone is definitely always crying.
And it's all fun and games.
Totally.
Before we cry, while we're crying, after we cry, there's like definitely some laughter through tears, and we are very understanding of each other.
And I would say this fact about me or us crying a lot, I would not have mentioned this a few years ago because I've been afraid of what people thought, or I'm not a leader if I cry, or I'm not whatever, blah, blah, all the things that we want to sort of assign to people who are sensitive or who are having emotions. And now, also, like we were talking, I just don't have any F's to give about that in this area of my life. So there.
Yeah, I've become more and more the real version of myself that I am behind closed doors externally over the last several years.
Yeah.
And it's working for me. Also, I hate it. I don't like being vulnerable. If we're talking real, I don't like being vulnerable. I want everybody to be like, wow, look at her. She does it all. She has it all. She's so confident. She never misses a step. I don't want to be like brought up to the top of a mountain, shrouded in the finest robes, labeled a guru. Alas, here I am, this real effing person with, feelings and crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are wearing orange though, so you kind of are guru-esque.
Oh, sure.
Totally.
Yeah. I cannot climb the side of a mountain in bare feet, though. Which some people who dress in orange and are called gurus can do.
True.
So,
right.
still work to be done.
Modern day. You're a modern day
Hey,
guru.
Noodles. Let's talk about our topic today.
All right.
So, John, I want you to think about a time in recent history where something happened to somebody else, or somebody else had a need, and you did not hesitate to stand up and advocate for them. What was that situation?
There are a lot of situations, I think, especially since for the past 20 years I've been working in organizations. Yeah, I can name a ton of when I felt like someone was being treated unfairly or wasn't given a fair shake or whatever, where I very easily like walked in, shared my perspective, advocated for them. Yeah, very natural for me to do.
Yeah. What is easy about doing that for someone else?
It's sort of this idea of a value of justice and fairness and equality. And, when I have that sort of justice bend in my personality. And so when I see things happening that I don't think are fair, it's just easy for me to naturally just go in there and share all of the views I have about a situation.
So now I want you to think about a situation, again, in recent history where there was something you needed. There was an injustice or an unfairness or a vulnerability, and you needed to advocate for yourself. And you either hesitated to do it or you didn't do it. And
Yeah, I mean,
what stopped or stalled you?
I think I've gotten a lot better at this over the last few years. I'm 44, I'll be 45 this year. I would say I don't think I really advocated for myself or became confident or started practicing really advocating for myself, except for the last few years. So I'm better at it now than I ever have been. But yeah, there are lots of areas of my life, in my relationship with my husband, or when I was working in an organization where even this last year or so, I hesitated to do that because I didn't want to be difficult. I was uncomfortable advocating for myself. I, you know, was resisting what the outcome of that advocacy might be. It might show some misalignment with me and the other person or me and the organization. And so I think, fear, discomfort, not knowing how has really stopped me in the past from really advocating for myself like I should.
I mean, that's so relatable. There are a lot of things I don't know how to do. And yet, when they come up for other people, suddenly I have this like miracle brain that knows how to solve it and who to reach out to and how to
Yeah.
answer the question and where I can step in and where I might be overstepping and all of that. And then when it comes to me, I have this like silence about how to. And when it comes to someone or someone's else, some other people, grammatically that sounded atrocious. Um, in a moment, I will stand up. And not only will I stand up, I will like continue standing up. I was on a call, a Zoom call not too long ago where somebody was doing like live brand reviews on LinkedIn. And this woman volunteered and got in the vulnerable seat of having her LinkedIn profile critiqued in front of everybody in the room, which was like 40 people, and having her thoughts challenged and her tagline challenged and all of these things. And the person who was doing it in a really kind and productive way. And somebody put in the comments, unsolicited, the person who was leading the session did not ask for people to come in and comment. And in fact, I think at the beginning had said, like, this is my job. This isn't a group thing.
Yeah.
Somebody in the comments, who, looked to be from his profile picture on LinkedIn in his 70s, sort of an old school headhunter recruiter, from his About Me section, posted in the comments, You should choose a picture of you that doesn't have you in a short red dress with high heels. You look like a two-bit hooker. Nobody said anything. I did. So I put in the comments, goodness, if you're such a successful headhunter recruiter, how might people feel knowing if they work with you, you may make such insulting judgment calls on their appearance. I think she looks terrific, and nobody is asking us to comment. So somebody then sent me a private message, and he said, that was really powerful. Thank you for saying something. I was really upset that he posted that too. And I messaged him back, I wish you had said that in the chat. There's still time. And he didn't. And it was so easy for me to stand up and advocate and stand up and say, like, hey, that's not nice. That's not right. Absolutely not. And then I think of my own situations, and like this week, I had a situation that felt pretty emergency like, where my storm door broke because the handyman who was fixing it fixed it incorrectly and it didn't close right, and it blew open in the wind, and it was slamming against my house repeatedly for 36 hours. And I hesitated to reach out to the landlord, whose job it was, please come fix this. I didn't sleep the overnight that this was going on, and I still hesitated, and I still needed a friend to say to me, like, you are not only allowed to reach out about this, but this is egregious and it should be fixed immediately, not tomorrow. And to have somebody else come and say that to me was like, yeah, of course. And then to sit down and write the email was like, I don't know. I don't know if I should. So it's this weird, like, duality that we live in, where it's so easy to go to somebody else and their needs, or even a community that we're in that has a need, and say, like, the collective needs this, or this individual person who has some level of vulnerability needs this, and I'm here to help. And then the other side of it is that we turn our back on ourselves and we question, how much do we actually need this? How much do we actually need what we need? So why do you think this happens?
I have so many reasons why I think this happens. One, I think sort of more broadly, the reason most or some people are able to provide really clear thoughts or advocacy or coaching to others is because, there is like some elevation that happens when you're not in the situation. And I find myself, I have the same experience as you, is that when something's happening, I'm just way deep in the weeds. Like I just feel like I'm like way in the tunnel and I can't see clearly. And even if I'm in the tunnel of my own stuff and someone is sharing their experience, I'm very easily able to objectively see what's going on. And so I think kind of to that broader point, oftentimes we're in our own heads. There's lots of noise in our own space. And until we get elevation for ourselves, we're not able to advocate for ourselves. Is sort of my theory on that. But I think there are lots of other reasons why we don't. And I kind of mentioned this before. One is I don't think, or at least I didn't have this growing up, and I assume a lot of other people didn't. No one ever really taught us to have difficult conversations. And I think advocating for ourselves often is a really difficult conversation because we can see it as conflict. We can see it as us versus them, which is the experience that I think a lot of people have around advocating for yourself. Um, and I don't think it has to be that way. I think I like to see how we can get a win-win out of things where we're, not that sort of typical negotiation. Well, like we all have to come away wanting more. Like my take on advocating for myself is being confident in what I think I want or deserve or should have in this situation. And if that aligns with you, great. If it doesn't, like this isn't supposed to happen, or this isn't going to work for me. And so I think a lot of people are, at least in my experience, me, I'm afraid of what this will reveal. Me advocating
Mm.
myself will reveal. And so many times I see this in marriages, I see this in work, I see this in sort of every aspect of ourselves is we don't want to advocate for ourselves One, because we don't know how. We don't know how to have the conversation. Two, we feel uncomfortable. Whenever I advocate for myself, I have a bodily reaction. My heart starts to race. My breath gets shallow. I feel like I'm in fight or flight mode. So I have to really work hard at centering myself and grounding myself and like being in my power as opposed to like coming up from it from a defensive kind of fight or flight kind of experience. But I think the most like the underlying reason is we're afraid of being told no, or if we're asking for a raise, we're afraid of not being valued by a company or an organization. And so, at least that's why I didn't advocate before. And now I would way rather see what is happening in the dynamic than choose not to provoke like that kind of outcome. And if something doesn't go my way, I know that this isn't the place for me. This is not aligned with like how I see myself or how I see myself with the company or how I see myself in the relationship. And so yeah, those are kind of my meandering thoughts around why I think people don't advocate for themselves or have a hard time advocating for themselves. How about you?
I love I love your frame of it. I think I would add to that, when you said something to the effect of like people seeing us and seeing vulnerability, like there's to me there's a vulnerability level, right? Which goes back to the I want everybody to see me as amazing and capable and not needing anything.
Yeah.
Um, Often I think what that does to us is that people don't think we need anything. So we're standing up for the vulnerable or what we see as vulnerable. And people are like, oh, they always stand up for the vulnerable. They speak up for themselves. And then here we are, or here I am, cowering in a corner, being like, I don't want to ask for it. I'm going to get in trouble. Right. And that for me seems like the other thing is like, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to make waves. I am a person who has a level of sensitivity about being in trouble, being rejected, being told I'm difficult, um, making things harder for other people that feeds my people pleaser soul. So when I come in and self-advocate, I'm like, I'm causing trouble for other people. I'm
Yeah.
making it hard for other people. So if I can't fix it myself in its entirety without anybody's help, I will spend time trying to until I have to ask for help. And by that point, I'm desperate. My voice is shaky. I don't want to ask for it. I'm embarrassed. Where, like, if I had started from the beginning with just like being what I feel like is what a normal person does, and just saying, like, hey, I don't know how to do this thing. Can you help me? Or I know you've dealt with this before. Can you tell me what you did so I can play off of that? And I know that, because I've been in practice on self-advocacy, that when I do come into self-advocacy from an earlier point, it feels good. I feel empowered being willing to receive support. I feel relatable because like I've never gone to anybody to ask for help with anything in my adult life who I like trusted, who's been like, no, you fool, I'm not helping you with that. And how dare you have needs, right? Like that's not real. And yet I still always have this sort of worry. I think that I'm going to be too much or too needy or make some sort of wave that people don't want me to make.
Can I share? I think one of the things that came up as you were talking was um, a time when I did advocate for myself in sort of the semi kind of recent past. I was asked to take on a new role at work, and there was a salary negotiation that happened there, and uh, the folks that I was negotiating with wanted to pay me way, way, way lower than what the job was worth. And in the past, I think I would have been like, "Oh, fine, this is a great opportunity for me. I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to get all this experience and blah 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 blah." not this time, MFer. I think what happened, and I think the thing that really has helped me to advocate for myself more than anything else in the world is, and I don't know how to fully articulate this, but having some sort of internal groundedness of like what I knew I wanted and what I knew I was worth and what I was available for, and knowing that helped me to understand the consequences of either not advocating for myself or advocating for myself. I was okay in that scenario not taking the job because I knew what I was available for. It was really clear. I knew what I was worth. I knew what the job would entail. And I had very little emotion around it. I wasn't attached to any sort of outcome because I knew that this was sort of my threshold. This is what I was worth. This is what I knew. And when we know those sorts of things about ourselves, when we have that really deep connectedness to ourselves, and instead of looking for things externally like validation or security or control, when we're insourcing that and we're doing that in ourselves, it's so much easier to advocate for yourself because like at the end of the day, I didn't really care what happened because I knew I would not be, if I got the job, I knew I wouldn't be happy because I would have felt undervalued. I would have felt underappreciated. I would have walked into that experience with all that baggage. And so I think for leaders and for people, our community who are listening today, that inner work of like knowing ourselves and being really clear with what we're available for and what's important to us is so powerful. And that comes through any sort of negotiation, any sort of conversation around advocating for yourself. And I think I mentioned this earlier, like I didn't have that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Like that's happened in like midlife. I can't believe I'm saying that. Like as a mid 40s person, like I'm just now really being super in touch with who I am and being okay with consequences, like whatever they might be, good or bad, because I'm not willing to abandon myself anymore in the way that I was when I was younger.
Hmm. I remember when that was happening. And I also want to add that you reached out for support. So you
100%.
self-advocated. Yeah. You self-advocated and you knew where you wanted to end up and you knew who to call. Me.
Of
Come
course,
on.
duh.
Course. But my experience as both an HR professional and an executive coach with an HR background helped with you being able to say like, this is where I want to land salary wise. So that's what I'm going to ask for. And then we had the discussion of like, ask for more because everybody plays games. It's a dumb thing to do in negotiations, like just say what you're going to pay and pay the thing and pay the worth and all of that. I could talk about that all day. But then we talked about like, how do you negotiate that? And if they come back with this number, do you accept that or not? And we talked about the breaking point number and all of those things. And you had the confidence to come to me and say like, this is what I'm worth. How do I get there?
Yeah.
And then we had that conversation. You got comfortable with the language that you were going to be using along the negotiation path. And you got what you needed to get in order to do that job because you were willing to reach out to somebody else, right? Because you didn't feel like if I'm going to advocate for myself, I have to do this all by myself, or it's like not worth it, or it's not powerful, or whatever things we tell ourselves. So that leads me to the question of like, what can we do as leaders who are the people who fight for everybody else? They're the people who like absolutely stand up in the moment and say, that is unjust. That's not the way you treat people. Here's what needs to happen. How do we turn that around on ourselves? And we're not going to go clearly from zero to I'm the best self-advocate I've ever met.
Lauren, that's a really good question and also a question that never gets answered, I don't think. Maybe it gets answered by some families or in schools, but I've never had an intentional conversation about this before, before today, or before we started talking about this topic. Um, Again, I think going back to my own experience, I think the most important thing that people can do or leaders can do is really go inside, go internally, and figure out what's important to them. What do they want? What do they want it to look like? What do they want it to feel like? And be really confident in creating boundaries around that experience that people are that you're looking to have. If you don't know what you're worth or have an idea or of what you want or what you deserve. And I think even when I say that, I get a little cringy, like what I deserve. Yeah, I deserve certain things. That's not an entitled, I'm not saying that in an entitled way, but like I deserve respect. I deserve those sorts of things. Um, and I think if you can go inside and get real access to that, what that is, and get grounded and rooted in that, I think from my own experience in working with others, it's way easier to have that expression come sort of externally into a conversation about what you want and deserve and kind of advocating for yourself, as opposed to like not knowing that stuff. Because then it just is sort of like there's no root to kind of come from. So I think the first thing is like get access to that, figure that out. And I think the second thing would be if you're anything like me, you had no clue how to have those conversations. And so I would start small, begin to think about with a friend or your kids or a partner or small things like low hanging fruit, low risk things to just try it out. I think practice is something we talk a lot about in coaching. And I think a lot of us are so hardwired to be perfectionists that we kind of sell ourselves short or we take ourselves out of the game before we even have the opportunity to like try. And so I would say like one, know what you want, kind of go internally. And two is practice and start with like the low risk stuff.
Yeah, I love that. I love a low risk, like, no, I don't want to share French fries, right? Like
Totally.
that is a form of self-advocacy, right? And it's when we keep saying yes because we're trying to be accommodating or compromise or whatever it is, we always end up meh,
Yeah.
like that was fine. And you know how I feel about fine. Um, so I think I would add to that, like really get active about support. And you and I always like talk in the midst of our conversations about having a coach and having a coach for accountability. This is one of those times where I think having a coach is so powerful
Yeah.
because you are good at advocating. Whoever you are out there who's still listening to this episode, you're here because you are good at advocating. You're good at the fight. You know the words and the language to get people to listen, and you don't do it for yourself. And that's where, yes, absolutely, a partner, a parent or a kid, if they're at the right age and stage to support you in that, um, a friend, a mentor, absolutely can be helpful. But having a coach, and especially having an executive coach who understands how corporate life works, who understands and has been in the shoes that you're in, can be so powerful for you to sit in a room with and say, like, I don't wanna be trouble. I don't wanna make waves. I don't wanna seem needy as I sit in my CEO or vice president or director seat advocating for other people. I don't want to be the vulnerable person because we get it. We've been there. We are that. And we also know what the tools are, what the questions are to ask, what the little steps towards practicing that are. And that is a level of expertise that comes in executive coaching that is hard to get from even your most constructive friend who doesn't have a coaching background or
Totally.
coach training.
I totally
And
agree.
so That's my like big deep dive into get yourself a coach if self-advocacy is something that you feel like you're on the road to. I love this quote from Shonda Rhimes, who wrote Year of Yes. And if you haven't read that book, not only read it, but like listen to it on audiobook because she self-narrates, and her story is like amazing. And she basically took this year to say yes to everything that came to her, to see like what she liked and what she didn't like, because she had spent a lot of her life and time being in her own house because that was what was comfortable to her. And one of the things she learned through this year of yes was how to be a good self-advocate. And she said, when you feel the need to apologize or explain who you are, it means the voice in your head is telling you the wrong story. Wipe the slate clean and rewrite it. No fairy tales. Be your own narrator. Go for a happy ending. One foot in front of the other. You will make it. And I just think we all deserve not only a happy ending, but a happy during. We deserve to find our joy in all of the ways that we can. And so much of that comes from saying out loud, this is what I want, this is what I need, and I'm going after it.
I love that. I love that so much.
John, I could talk to you all day about this and everything else we talk about, but we are out of time. So before we go, I would love to hear your final thoughts on this subject.
If you haven't done it before, it's probably going to be a little challenging. It's probably going to be a little uncomfortable. You're going to feel a little bit out of your depth and like you're kind of rummaging in the dark a little bit. It's okay. Give it a try. Find out what's really important to you and just do it. And start small, go big, change your whole life.
That's a beautiful way to end. You can change your whole life, and you've done it, and I've done it, and there's still more work to do, right? Like the example I gave today about my storm door was this last week. So there's always growth. But what a beautiful sentiment to end on. So thank you all for being here. Please take some time to like our podcast, subscribe to it, and tell a friend about it so that more leaders like you can be in our community.
Thanks so much for listening today. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at icouldtalktooyouallday@gmail.com with your comments, questions, and topic requests. And subscribe so you don't miss an episode.